Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to learn how to create pivot table but not in Excel, in Python. Creating pivots in Python is not a rocket science. It has the same layout as in Excel but with coding. So to better understand the structure of pivots in Python, we will refer to pivot table layouts that I created in Excel. Let me quickly walk you through the data that I'm going to use for this course. The data is a sample sales data where each record is the sales information of a product in a particular quarter, month and year. In Python, to create pivot table, we use the pivot table function and then feed in arguments to that function. I have mentioned the arguments that are required to be put in the pivot table function. Let's look at the first pivot table layout. Here I want to create a pivot that gives me the sum of sales for each product line. So we will put in the pivot table function after the data frame name. The first argument will be values. Here the value column will be sales as we are looking at the table sales of the product line. Second argument will be index. The columns that will form the row label in Excel pivot will be mentioned here as index in Python. In this layout, product line is the row label, so the index will also be product line. The third argument will be aggfunc. In this argument, we tell Python as to how it should aggregate the value column. That is to say whether I want to sum the sales or count the sales. In our case, we will sum the sales. I have supplied all the arguments required for creating this pivot. I will run this code and you can see I get the pivot table exactly like the one above. Okay, moving on. In the second layout, I want two values in my pivot table. I want quantity ordered and I want sales for the product line. So in this case, the only change we are going to make is adding another value in the values argument. So I'm going to put in the pivot table function, df.pivot table, and then in the values argument, I need to pass on a list where I will pass on two columns. So the first will be quantity ordered, and then I will put in a comma, and then I will put in the second column, which is the sales. The index will remain the same because the product line is still the row label here. So our index will also be product line. The third argument, which is the aggfunc, will be sum because we want sum of sales as well as quantity ordered. I'm going to run the code. And now we can see that I have two values in my pivot table. In the third layout, I want to see the sum of sales of each product, but this time I also want to see for each year. I will type in the pivot table function. The first argument will be values, so I'm going to pass in the sales column. The second argument is index, so it's going to be product line. But in this pivot, we are also going to pass on columns argument because we want a column label as year here. The fourth argument will be aggfunc, where we are going to pass in sum. And now I'm going to run the code. You can see now I have both the row labels as well as column labels in our pivot. The fourth layout here is just an inverse of the third layout, just to show you that you always have an option to flip the rows and columns. I will copy the pivot table code from above, and in place of index I will remove product line and will add year. Similarly, from the columns argument, I'm going to remove year and I will add product line. I will run the code, everything is going to be the same, and I can see that now my pivot table is flipped. Okay, so we finally come to the last part of this course. Till now, whatever pivots we have created, we were not having any row or column total. But in Excel, column total or row total come by default. But in Python, we need to pass on another argument called margins. So I'm going to write in the function pivot table. Here we are going to pass in two values. So one will be the quantity ordered and the other will be the sales. The index will be product line because that's the row label that we have here for this pivot. Aggfunc will be sum because we want sum of both quantity ordered and sales. And the fourth argument will be margins, which we will set as true to get the grand total. Now I'm going to run the code. I can see that I have the total at the bottom for both quantity, order and sales. By default, margins argument is false. As a result, when we create a pivot, we won't see totals. So to get the totals, we need to set it as true. This was all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you learned something new, then please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you again and happy learning.